All right, so in this video, we are going to be discussing the composition of functions. So let's take a look and see what a composition of function really is. We will have the notation right here where it looks like an open circle. That is not to be confused with multiplication. And so basically what's happening is you have the output of the inner function. So in this case, according to this notation, g of x would be the inner function. So x is going to be the input of g, and then the output of g of x becomes the input of the other function, in this case, which would be f. All right, so the fact that you're using and you're inputting into one function, the answer to that becomes the input to another function. That whole idea is considered a composition of functions. Okay. The domain of a composition will be talked about in another video. So let's take a look and see what we can do with interpreting compositions. Okay, and also right over here is a little diagram. First, you would input x for g, and then that output g of x is going to become the input of f. Okay, so that's just a little diagram to help you out there. All right, so here we go with A. It says the function c of s gives the number of calories. So c is going to be the number of calories burned while completing s sit-ups. Okay, so calories burned completing s sit-ups. And s sub t gives the number of sit-ups a person can complete in t minutes. Okay, so we are supposed to interpret c of s of 3. So always we want to work on the inner function first. So s of 3 is going to indicate the number of sit-ups. I want to color code this a little bit better. Okay. The number of sit-ups completed in 3 minutes. Okay. And then we can take a look at the c of s of 3. And if s of 3 is the number of sit-ups completed in 3 minutes, then c is going to be the number of calories burned from the number of sit-ups completed in 3 minutes. Okay, so this is the interpretation of this function right here, c of s of 3. I highly recommend that you always start with the inner function in your interpretation, and then you use this interpretation as the input into the next function. All right, so pause the video, try number 2. Let me read it to you, and then we're going to see what we can do to make sense of it. It says, suppose f of x gives miles that can be driven in x hours, and g of y gives the gallons of gas used in driving y miles. Which of these expressions is meaningful? In other words, which of these expressions makes sense? Is it f of g of y, or is it g of f of x? So pause the video, and then we're going to discuss it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when it comes to analyzing a certain situation is really to make sense of what you're given. So let's color code this a little bit here. So I say, suppose f of x gives miles that can be driven in x hours. Well, then that would indicate that f of x is going to be giving you the number of miles as the input is driving X hours. Okay, so remember the input is X hours. So if I drive 5 hours, then that means I can compute the number of miles that I drove. And then let's do purple for G of Y. Well, G of Y gives the gallons of gas used. All right, so we'll put gallons of gas used in driving Y miles. So G of driving Y miles. So the input in here needs to be miles, okay? Which of these expressions is meaningful? Well, let's take a look at G of Y, which we already did. G of Y is going to indicate driving Y miles equals the gallons of gas. And then we are supposed to take this output, which is gallons of gas, and plug it into F. So we are supposed to take the gallons of gas and plug it into the F function. So that's going to be difficult to do because we're supposed to take the gallons of gas as the input to F of X, but F of X, the input needs to be hours. Okay, so if you look at F of X, right, our input over here needs to be driving X hours. So this one right here is very confusing. I don't think that that makes a lot of sense. So let's take a look at F of X, right? Let's do this one right here. Well, F of X is going to give you based on the number of hours driving. So driving X hours is going to give you the number of miles. And then G of F of X says you're taking the number of miles. So driving the number of miles is going to give you how much gas that you've used. And so this actually makes sense, right? So if you're actually driving for 5 hours, you've traveled, let's say, 200 miles, and then since you've drove 200 miles, you can compute how much gas you've used.